Hey everybody, I'm Daniel G. Garza, and welcome to another episode of Put It Together. It's a special Thursday episode, so thank you for joining us. I want to welcome everybody who's watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thank you. Would you mind sharing this on your page so that other folks can watch along with you? If you're watching us on YouTube, scroll down, hit that subscribe button, and the notification bell. It'll let you know every time there's a new show on the air. And remember, we've got horoscopes on Monday. We've got Christian and Daniel on Wednesdays, Zodiacs on Fridays, and Put It Together live stream at its regular time, noon on Saturdays. But you want to hit that bell because shows like this will pop up once in a while. You don't want to miss them. Remember, you can join the conversation, be part of the show. All you got to do is just post in the chat whatever channel you're watching on. On today's show, I know, I say it every time. I'm excited to have my guest, and I'm excited because this is part of the Fringe Festival, and I'm so happy that she reached out to me and asked to be on the show because I looked into it, so I'm really excited about the conversation. We purposely didn't talk in the pre-production meeting when she gets here early because I was like, no, I want to find out with the rest of the audience some of the stuff. So let me tell you a little about Holly McNeill. Is a writer, producer, and performer. She made a vow to do better and spent 20 years making good on that vow. Her quest would evolve into the creation of the Per Love and its P period, E period, R period, L period, O period, B period, E period formula. She now shares Per Love, a straightforward yet transformational set of mindfulness and meditation practices as a coach, teacher, lecturer, and most recently live on stage at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Without further, let me bring her on stage so she can tell us more about this. Hello, Holly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank
And
you.
thank you for the special Thursday show. I know that you don't usually do Sundays, but we've got a show coming up on Saturday, so I appreciate the accommodation. It's wonderful.
Hey, if there's time, we'll do a show. Like all you got to do is ask me. It's like, do you want to talk? I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to talk. So,
Nice, nice.
But so for people who I always tell people how we met, and Holly actually reached out to me, which I was very surprised and impressed, and like I was like, yay! May I ask? Because I didn't ask you in the pre how you found me.
So Sue from Cadenza, right? Being a part of the Hollywood Fringe Festival, I've met so many amazing people, and it's been such a wonderful experience. And Sue has been one of those people. And I've talked to her at some of the pre-festival events, and she just said, just keep reaching out and get the word out there, and sometimes people will respond. And so I did, and you did, and she's wonderful. And she speaks highly of you, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad. I had that idea. I think you sent that in the email, but yes, this year was our second interview with her show. I did one for her, like 3 years ago, 4 years, right before the lockdown. So she's a wonderful person. So Sue, if you're watching, hello. Thank you for the connection. Tell us a bit more about you. But we did say that we're neighbors. I don't know if that's cool.
Yep. I live in Irvine, and you live in Laguna Beach, so very close. But I came the long way. I don't know how long you've been here, but I came from South Dakota to Minneapolis to New York to San Francisco to here.
Wow.
So it's been a long journey to get here. And I must say, I'm glad I didn't live here first, because I appreciate having known other parts of the country, but who wants to leave, right? Who would want to leave? Sorry, it's beautiful. I mean, it's expensive to be here, but it's just wonderful. Great place to be.
I've been in Laguna now for 14 years. January was 14 years. And I came from Texas, straight here.
Oh, right. So you've been in other time zones yourself, at least another.
So I grew up in Texas, met my former boyfriend in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity came up to move to Laguna. He had lived in this complex before, and the opportunity came to move. And then we broke up, and he went back to Houston. And every year it was, okay, one more year, and then I'll leave. I'll go back to Texas. And then here we are, 14 years later.
So you are. Right. Well, it's a great place. I've never lived in Texas, so I can't speak to it, but happy to be here.
I would say this: the food is excellent. There's some great people, and it's hot. So
in Texas.
Yes, that's
Yes.
that's that's pretty much what you need to know. Good people, good food, and it's hot. So
Hot.
there
Yes,
you
yes.
go. But
And it's big.
I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear about uh, lost formula to happiness and everything that involves. And so, Holly, tell us how you put it together.
You know what? I'm so glad you asked. I start with that question, and I love the name of the show because sometimes you put it together based on kind of to cover up your faults, your defaults, or your patterns and the negative things you think about yourself, right? Sometimes you put your life together that way, and that's exactly what I did. So I had to unput it together, and like I said, at age 34, I hit a really super low point in my life. I had it all. I had put it all together. I had a great career. You know, my handsome husband and I built a beautiful home for our two lovely children that housed our nice cars and hosted our great friends. You know, right down to our fabulous pets. But the foundations of that life was flawed. And so I made this vow when I hit rock bottom at age 34 to do better. And the show we're doing in Hollywood is kind of way down the journey. That was right around the time of 9/11, right? So 2001 that I made that vow, and the show Lost Formula Happiness is a result of that journey, which has been life changing for me, and hopefully in time I can share that what I learned on this 20-year journey, basically across the country and from coast to coast.
Wow. You talk about rock bottom, and it like it.
You're
Whoa.
speechless.
I know. Where can we get some words back? I'm going to be celebrating. In fact, in next week, I'll be celebrating 16 years clean and sober. So
Right.
when you talk about rock bottom, it's like, oh yeah, I know the address to rock bottom. I can get you
Yes,
there.
yes, you've been there. Yes, you've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
there. Right.
Um,
And it's interesting. You know, a lot of times, some people have to hit rock bottom. I have met people along my journey that were lucky enough to have a mom that was a meditation coach, or was handed the book The Power of Now at age 7, or you know, there are those people. But a lot of people it's unfortunate you almost have to hit rock bottom before you want to try to find something different. You
yeah,
know.
there. I don't want to hear more story, but I remember being one of those people that said, "Yes, I'm not doing great, but I'm not them. I'm not there. Like they're bad. I'm not that bad yet." Until you realize there's nowhere else to go,
Right.
and
Right.
now all of a sudden you're them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for me, it was more like I was really good at faking it, and until I got to the point where I couldn't fake it even to myself anymore, you know. And when I made this vow and my life kind of imploded, people were like, "What are you doing? You have everything everybody could ever possibly want, right?" So on the outside, I had it all. Like I said, people were shocked
Yeah.
when I made the changes that I did. Yeah.
So I always believe that there's that mirror moment, like when we look at ourselves and go, "Okay, you, as I said, you're them now." Do you remember that conversation with yourself?
Oh
Like,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It opens our show, and it goes like this: sitting on the toilet in the middle of the night at age 34, I had hit rock bottom. I had made some poor choices. I was scared from some decisions that I made, and I sitting there crying my eyes out. Um, it was it was 2003, and basically, or sorry, it was 2001, like I said, right around 9/11. And I vowed, life, God, Buddha, universe, anyone out there, help me and I'll do better. Give me another chance and I'll change. And I had no idea what was better. I had no idea what I was looking for, because I was I say, so in the show, I say, this was my moment. And this is actually, even though it looked wonderful, it's actually the lowest moment of my unhappy, self-absorbed, anxiety-filled life. And I made this vow, and I got this second chance. And with my karmic debt in tow, I went out to make good on that vow. Yeah.
that's not very much because people don't realize. Let me just acknowledge Poetas Sin Futuro show. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for being here.
Yes,
Um,
thank you for being here.
uh, People don't realize that hitting rock bottom is is very similar to going through the grief process because you're starting to lose part of you. And that sounds
Mhm.
for me like that bargaining stage is like sending out an SOS. Whoever hears this,
That's right.
can you please reply? It's throwing that water. I mean, what is it? That message in a bottle into the sea,
Yep,
and hoping
that's
somebody
right.
gets it. Does that
I
make
was
sense?
so low and so desperate and so hurt, and but these were my own choices that I made, and I recognize that these were my own choices that I made. And so, and again, I had no idea where I was going to go, right? But and it wouldn't be easy, right? The first thing it did is it catapulted me out of a mutually manipulative and controlling marriage into an 8-year battle for my children. Would take everything I had to prevent my alienation from them. I should say my eventual alienation from them, because my father was alienated from us when I was a child, and I know the damage it does to people. Right, it makes you feel unwanted and unlovable, which is what I covered up. Right, creating my world. And so when this started to happen again in my life, I knew I had to think about somebody else. I knew I had to make a change. I knew I had to do something. And so that was part of this vow. And those 8 years, beat the crap out of me, but I needed them, right? I needed them to kind of start to show me what else there is.
You
And
Before we continue to my question, here we have a comment on the board. Sometimes
sure.
rock bottom can be a moving target. How have you tried to ensure this issue does not pop up for you in this time frame? Good question.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? I'm all about making an intention and keeping it, and what can come back from that. Because there was a couple of times during this journey that I decided, oh, I just kind of I forgot my vow, right? And I let it go, and I would fall right back into it, right? And so after you do that a couple of times, and life whips you back into shape, I mean, you just don't do it again, right? It if you make an intention and you keep it and you stick with it and you do it over, and you're with it every day, and you watch for what shows up, stuff will show up. But as soon as you start ignoring that and going back to whatever you were, you go backwards. So after I did that 2 or 3 times, and I had all my bumps and bruises, I promised never to do that again, ever.
So you've mentioned the vow a couple of times. Can you
Hmm.
tell us what it said, or what you vowed to yourself?
That was it. That was it. I had no idea what I was so lost and so stuck. I had no idea what I just vowed to do better. Right. But I tell you what, Daniel, and making that vow and keeping with it, I also tripped upon this amazing, amazing path, right? That started giving me answers when I needed it. Books showed up, right? People and situations along the way. It's like I didn't even really have to figure out what the vow was. I just had to follow what showed up.
That's
And
interesting. It's interesting because I kind of can relate to that. It's like you don't know what you're promising; you're just promising to yourself.
that's right. That's right. There has to be better than this. That's, yeah.
Because I remember being my first day at rehab and going, okay, let's be better. Let's
Yeah.
be bigger. And I can't remember the words now because but I wasn't sure what it meant. I just knew that I didn't want to be where I was anymore.
Yeah. That is a great thing about intention and about our true nature, that if you put it out there, you don't have to know how to get there, right? You just have to know where you want to go and stay with it. So I was on a business trip, and I have the stack of books here over here. And this first book that showed up, I just showed up, right? And I opened this book, and in it says, be careful what you ask for, right? Right in the introduction, it says, if you rock the boat, right, the universe is going to respond and send you the right people, events, and situations along the way. So you have to be ready for this. If you want to make this change, you have to be ready for it. But if you stick with it, it'll definitely be there for you, for anyone. Yeah, it's great.
There's something that you mentioned, and so you're talking about a manipulative relationship and an alienated father, which in its way has a manipulation factor to it.
Oh yeah.
My question would be, coming from that upbringing where somebody manipulated a situation to keep people away from you, was
Hmm.
it easy to fall into a relationship that was similar to what you saw growing up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We repeat, I mean, life will repeat lessons to us until we learn them, right? So I had a very manipulative parent, and my husband and myself, then I married a very manipulative person, and and we created this perfect life together. So absolutely, until you look at it, until you face whatever life's trying to show you, you will keep repeating those things. But because I had been through it as a child, because I made this vow, apparently, life's like, okay, here you go, here's your chance, right? And those 8 years were so hard because I was only really caring about me, because that's you do that when you're suffering and struggling. But I had to think of my children, right? I had to do it. And the only reason I did that and to stay in it was because I knew, right? But yeah, absolutely. We repeat those patterns for sure.
Yeah, because I used to say this in comedy to people. I was like, I was that alcoholic that didn't know I was an alcoholic because I was brought up in a culture. It's like, it's, we bought a car, let's have a cocktail. It's a party, let's have a drink. It's
Right.
Tuesday, we mowed the lawn. Everybody gets a beer. So when as I grew up and I was doing that on a regular basis, I didn't know it was bad because I was comfortable in that world until I
Right.
wasn't. Until I wasn't.
Right.
Um, before I want to move on to something else, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I tell you, what I teach in these practices is that you become so familiar with something that I call it our TEF, our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. That after a while, you forget what caused all these patterns in the first place. You become so familiar with them that you can't even see them anymore, right? You can't even see what's really happening
Yeah.
until you can create some space between your true nature and kind of what's happening. So absolutely, yeah, you can get so stuck in it, which I was so lost and stuck in it that yeah, you can't even see where you're at for sure.
And because it becomes our comfort zone, we're
Uh-huh.
a comfort zone for a reason. You're like, oh yeah, everybody else must live this way because this is what I'm used to. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So 8 years, you figure out that that is not the path that you're supposed to. That's not the path you should continue on anymore. Because I feel like everything that we do has its purpose. How how do you go from, okay, this is my life, let me produce something and show it to the world?
Right, exactly. Right. So like I said, at age 34, it implodes, right? And basically everything implodes, right? And so then it was during that 8 years that I started reading books, and I started, I needed that strength to help me every time the cops showed up, every time the kids were, showing, their anger towards me, that, every time, um, every time there was a confrontation, I needed that strength. So I was reading these books to find that strength to get me through that time. And towards the end of the war, I called it, my boys came to me and said, we're going on vacation with dad and we're not coming back. And they walked away. And and I knew fighting for the custody I already had would mean maybe them having to testify against me. So I knew something told me I had done enough, right? So I laid down that sword. I took out that armor, laid down that sword, and left that battlefield forever, which is a line from the show. But and then I made a choice to move from Minneapolis. It's so hard to move as a childless mother, right? I was living in Minneapolis. At the time, I'm from the Black Hills of South Dakota. I had moved to Minneapolis. I made a choice to leave my children. I mean, I wasn't seeing them anyway, to pursue more spiritual growth and career growth on the East Coast. And so I did that. And in my early 40s, I started to realize that even though my career, I'm an architect, I've done hospitals across the country and internationally. I worked in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, worked for Stanford, but I knew that I had to start teaching about what I learned. So I put two intentions out to the world. Intentions are fabulous. The first was to retire from my chosen profession as an architect before I turned 50. And the second was to have the time and space to write about what I thought I knew back then. So yeah, I retired 4 days before I turned 50. And in 2017, I sat down to start writing about all of this. Yeah.
Wow, that's talk about because I teach. transpersonal coaching, and I people ask me about manifestation. I'm like, what's your imagination? What's your dream?
Yeah.
Write it, manifest it, uh,
Mm-hmm.
strategy, and then do the when it's there, take the step into reality, because that's usually the hard part. That when everything
That's
is like
right.
lined up. So 4 days before you turn 50, you've been asking the universe for a change of life at 50. The universe is
Mm-hmm.
like,
Here
Holly,
you go. All right. Here
delivery.
you go. Yeah.
Were you ready?
I was ready. I was ready. And, I had done a lot with my career and I was on my way to be managing principal of one of the largest firms in the United States. And, it wasn't where I wanted to be. I think that, you know, things show up in your life for a reason. And I practiced Buddhism for 5 years, 6 years. We're first supposed to kind of heal yourself and then try to share what you've learned with others. So I was completely ready. But it wouldn't be until we were all sequestered in our homes during the COVID pandemic that I would print out a book proposal that I had written. And I would look over at it, and it was like the lights came on, right? It was like a final piece of a puzzle came together, and I saw this path that I had been on, and I'm still on, right? From the small and isolated and fearful to as far as you want to go, to the infinite or whatever. And that's what the Pure Love practices are all about. So, yeah.
That's okay. So interesting, because now I think for a lot of us, and by the way, Poeta, I saw your question. I'll answer that in just a second. I'll get to it. But because here we are, here we all were on this plan, the strategy to get to wherever we were going. And then
Mhm.
the universe goes, nope, I'm going to pause everybody for a second.
That's right. That's right.
And because I mean, I still remember where I was kind of like the week before COVID, the shutdown.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does, let me ask this. When you have been in a relationships that were manipulative, that were stifling, that kept you closed up, and you're just starting to like run, and then all of a sudden the world says, no, I'm gonna close you up again.
Yeah.
What is that? Is there any triggers? Does it
Yeah.
cause
I, I've been, like I said, once I put this intention out there and when I didn't fall off the horse, right? I have this big trust, this big trust that everything shows up for a reason. And so in 2018, I got a call from my niece, Jocelyn, who's on. So we're not actors. It is my niece and me in the show. She's a singer-songwriter, and I got a call from her, and she said, "Hey, I just broke up with my boyfriend. Can I come live with you for 2 weeks?" That's the joke. And 4 months later, she moved out. But anyway, we really bonded during that time, and I realized that she was struggling the same as I was. And a manager friend of hers had suggested that we work together because she's a singer-songwriter, and I was writing and reading. So, so we did a show down in Orange County, down in Laguna Beach. And I was just Googling. This is how life works, right? I'm just Googling, how to do a show. I don't know anything. And I get Matthew Quinn from Asylum Theater. And I don't even know anything, right? I'm from South Dakota. I'm here doing this thing. And him and his wife, Berta, and their daughter come down and see our show, right? In Laguna Beach. And I was just so amazed that, and he invited us up to do a show in Hollywood, which then flopped. But then he helped us to hire a director. At that time, the show was called The Mother Wound, right? And so we were all ready to do the 2020 Fringe Festival with this director, John Coppola, who is wonderful. And then, of course, we got shut down. Okay. But for me, the practices didn't show up until the pandemic. And so doing the show with the practices is much better. For the purposes of what I'm trying to do and sharing this information, the COVID pandemic was kind of like, you're not, it's not ready yet, right? And so doing it now, John was more than happy to be our director again, which is always, affirming. And so in that, I mean, COVID was terrible, but in that particular instance, we just weren't ready. So
wow. For everybody watching, it is a special episode of Put It Together live stream with our friend, writer, director,
not director.
of Lost Formula to Happiness, Holly McNeill. Um, Shifting a little bit. So, what is the lost formula to happiness, Holly?
Right. I'm so glad you asked that question. So, uh, the formula to happiness, I think, is lost in each one of us, hidden in plain sight. And the formula to happiness really is finding your true nature, separate from your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. But what I've learned over the years is that there's many teachings on Buddhist teachings and secular spirituality teachings on we're all whole and the middle way and finding compassion. But there was kind of this missing piece on how to get there, right, from the small and isolated. So the Pure Love practices is a set of mindfulness and meditation practices. Pledge, evaluate, recognize is the more cerebral part of the formula, where we're looking at neuroscience and psychology. These three simple practices create the basis for your mental transformation. 3 simple practices, if you do them over and over, that can then open you up to love, which is the more spiritual part. Locate, open, vest, and expand, where there's many teachings about opening your heart, the flow of energy in your heart, vesting in what you find there, and expanding beyond your conditioned limits. But you don't have to go past her if you don't want to. And in these practices, they will help to kind of unravel this kind of neural net of negative patterns. We each have 6,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those are negative. And in time, we create this neural net of negativity. And what these practices do help you to unravel them, recognize it. First, pay attention, then recognize them in your daily life so that you can change them. And,
So that's what this is, right? Correct?
Yeah, Pure Love. Yeah, pledge, evaluate, recognize, locate, open, vest, and expand. And for all of your listeners out there, if you can't make it to the show, I hope you can, of course, make it to the show. But if you go to my website there and you sign up for our newsletter, you get a link to a free 1-hour class that explains all of the practices in detail. Excellent.
I'm there. We definitely have to talk. I remember we talked about this, and I know you checked out some of my stuff, but I started practicing intuitive energy readings. And
energy, yes, I saw that.
I became a Reiki master in 2016 after my cancer, and got my coaching certificate during the lockdown. Kind of like you, I was like, I need something to do. So then I discovered that what I was doing was actually transpersonal coaching, which is it just blew my mind when I found that out. I was like, oh, I just got chills. Where there is this balance between spiritual and logic, which is so amazing.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I get what you're saying. Okay, so we have a question. Here we go. Do you have a daily spiritual or meditative practice you do to maintain your balance each day?
Each day. Well, I don't have one in particular. The Pure Love practices are designed to that you can move back and forth, however far you need, or you can be back. You can go from one to the other wherever you need to go. The first one starts with 6 minutes a day. Pledge. We pledge to watch our minds for 1 minute 6 times a day until we make that a habit. And so for me currently with this show, the Hollywood Fringe Festival, because sometimes I'm like, oh my, what am I doing on this? It's stressful too. For me personally, my practice now is the middle way, and trying to, let life relax in the present moment and the reality that is, right? Because when you do that and you create space, in Pur, you're creating space to be able to do this. And when you do that, wisdom comes through, right? When you create that space and consciousness, wisdom comes through. So that's my current practice.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let me go before we move on to El Poeta's questions. How do you know when you're already an alcoholic? I hope it's not when you ask this question. I'll answer because you haven't brought this up, but I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I knew that I enjoyed alcohol a lot. until I didn't. And then when my drinking made drugs appear and made me appear in strangers' beds, and I didn't remember how I got there. Or I would wake up in my couch with my clothes on and had no recollection of how I got there, but my car had a bump on the side of the door for no reason. I knew I had an issue. And then, fortunately for me, I had to go to court, and I had some problems with the law, and I had to go to court, and the judge asked offered me a year in jail or 3 months in rehab, and I thought about it. I was not, because I was like, I'm not, drugs may be a problem, but I know how to drink, and of course I knew how to drink. I just didn't know how to stop drinking at the end of the night. Fortunately, I went to rehab for 3 months, and that completely changed my life. I was 36 years old. I became a man at 36, and it was summer camp. I still remember it fondly. So for me, it was good. But if you know, I guess there's no simple answer, so we can move on. But the short answer is, if you know how to start drinking, but you don't know how to stop, I would start questioning if I'm an alcoholic or not. So, but definitely, Poeta, reach out to me privately, and I will give you more information on my journey. So, okay, moving on from that. Of course, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. So when people come to, sorry, I have a hair in my face. So when people come to see the show, from what I'm reading and from what I read in about, it's not necessarily a show,
Right.
but it's a showing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I've called it a performance lecture. My director suggested that, although I have people that don't call it a lecture, because both my niece and I, we didn't want to just share our story. We wanted to give the audience something to take with them. And I've been teaching, like I said, I've been teaching these classes online since the beginning of last year. Maybe I didn't say that, but I've been teaching them online since the beginning of last year. Now I've created this free class you can do, but this was the first opportunity I had to do it live. And because I had done the Fringe Festival, had started doing the Fringe Festival in 2020, I knew all about it. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have an avenue into that. I wouldn't have a clue how to do it. But because everything showed up the way it was, this opportunity came to do this show. And part of me is like, what are you doing? Why would you want to put, to do that? But I trust so much this journey that I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to not do it and then wonder why, right? So we wanted to give back to people. So it is our stories, but it's also the first we delve into the practices. And you know what, it was great. It was so wonderful to do it live and to see the people's faces, and they would laugh when I didn't think it was funny, and they wouldn't laugh when I thought it was funny, but it was much more joyful. So one thing I've learned from giving this live performance is that learning. I mean, there's definitely serious parts in the show, but in learning, in doing it, moving forward. I'm taping the show on the 17th, and there's just a few tickets left. So if you can come fill those seats, that'd be great. Because we're blocking off some of the seats, but we do have a bigger audience for that show. That I can make this more joyful, right? And people went away, if you read the reviews, amazed. They didn't know what to expect. Like they call it vulnerability is kind of what they said, that being vulnerable after everything I've been through, being vulnerable is quite easy for me, I guess, which isn't easy for a lot of people. So I'm willing to put it out there and to share my story, but also I wanted to leave people with something. So it's it's an interesting, fringy type show for sure.
I'm going to show the poster again. Two generations unravel the happiness thief. Lost formula to happiness. First question before I move on to ask you about the cast. Who is the happiness thief?
Right. I'm glad you're asking all the right questions. Well, it's I'm sorry, people, it's not your mother-in-law or your boss or your ex-lover or spouse. The happiness thief is no more than a tangle of your own thoughts, emotions, and feelings, right? Because no matter how twisted our stories are or how miserable they make us, we This bandit whispers to us every day to protect our negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings at all costs. And that's what we go into the show, right? We create these patterns from these negative thoughts. We create these patterns, and then we live our lives from these patterns, and we forget they're even there in the first place. But this happiness thief never forgets, right? And we're living from that standpoint if we're not paying attention, if we haven't grown our awareness and consciously made a change. But the good news is I found through all my studies from millennial wisdom to modern day that all of the teachers and gurus pointed back to a few simple truths, right? We are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. We are not our TEF. We are so much more than that. And if we create space between our thoughts, emotions, and feelings and our true nature, we can start to see that. Just one other thing I wanted to say is that this tangle, this ego, right? So our ego, our false identity, as Buddhists call it, come from this entanglement. But if you unravel it, there's no center. Right? If you pull it apart, there's no bandit there. Right? Just the space comes through. So if we don't engage in our thoughts, our negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings, the happiness thief has no choice but to fall apart. And Tim Olmsted, who's an amazing Buddhist teacher, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he says this isn't spirituality. This isn't Buddhism or whatever. This is just how your mind works, right? If you see a yellow world, if you see an angry world, if you're looking through if your mind is angry, you see an angry world. If your mind is anxious, you see an anxious world. Right? But when you start in these practices, you start paying attention to this thief, right? And you recognize, or you pledge 1 minute to start paying attention, create the habit of paying attention. You evaluate what they say you stuffed in your black bag, those parts of you rejected, and then you recognize them as they come up in your daily life.
I like that. And it's interesting how, like, I knew some of that, but in a different way. But yeah, it's kind of like that, like waking up, the first thought that comes into your mind in the morning. And if it's like another day, well, it's going to be another day. But if you wake up with, yes, I have another day.
Yeah. And you can do that. We make that choice, but it's not just our mind, it's our bodies too. So there's a great movie that came out in 2004, What the Bleep Do We Know? And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about when we think these thoughts, right? Our brain just floods our body with those peptides of negativity, depression. And so every cell in our body then splits and has more receptors for this. And so that's why you wake up in the morning. You don't even have to think. For me, it was guilt. You don't even have to think anything guilty. It just shows up because it's in your body, right? But you can train yourself. You can learn to recognize those things and make those changes. And you're literally rewiring your brain, and you make those changes. So the show is kind of a fun, very serious way. We talk about our own stories and kind of how we got to where we are and what's in our black bags and what you can do to start to change that.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I think I learned it when I was going to therapy post-cancer, and I had the Survivor's Guild, and my therapist at the time was like, well, if you wake up every day feeling guilty, you will live your life feeling guilty. Like, you need to just like change that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's right. You do. And like I said, so this show, my big thing is unlovability and unworthiness, because of obviously my father left, he didn't love us, we were told. And so doing this show has brought up every single piece of that exists in me, right? And so I'm so grateful to have been, invest in V. I talk about how your small isolated self is using your thoughts, emotions, and feelings to keep you afraid and stuck, where your universal all pervasive self is showing you in every person, place, or thing, every event in your life, what you need to set yourself free, right? And so I've taken this challenge of this of this festival, because to be honest, it's been hard to get people to come because I have no connections in LA, right? And it turns out that the Fringe is a lot about, people and getting them to come to your show. And so that's been a huge challenge for me, which rubs up right against my unworthiness and unlovability, right? But if you look at it as an opportunity to let that be, in that space you created, it's so freeing. It's anyway, fabulous.
That's such a cool way of putting it. It's like if I'm stepping into something where I don't know any person, place, or thing, but I take it as I don't know anybody versus I get to meet new people.
Right.
I just got chills. It's such a different way of thinking.
It is. It
We
is.
have another question on the board for you. Has Per Love been able to resolve or help one to move on from extreme trauma they may have experienced for an extended time frame from a loved one?
So we teach a forum class. I teach a forum class twice a month, and it's called the Perfect Practice Forum. And I've done some coaching, and even my director the other day, he's like, I was so honored to direct because you've changed my life. Thank you, John, for those wonderful comments. And so definitely from experience, I can tell you that it worked. I just took the really long way to get there. But I've had a lot of positive feedback from the people in my forum classes and the people I've coached. But you know what's so important? If you want to make this change, I tell in the show, if you want to make a change, if you want to do better, if you want to learn something, you must do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So if you don't take anything else away from the whole show, that's it. You must be persistent, because if you think about all the negative things we've told ourselves over and over and over again, in order to make that change, you must repeat it. There's a CD that showed up in my life by John Kabat-Zinn, and even before my Buddhist study, and I listened to it over and over, like 20, 30 times. If there's something that works for you, I know I'm doing all the talking here, so I apologize.
It's your episode, yes.
Yeah, so I say in R, recognize, there's two paths to recognize. The direct path, which is pledge plus evaluate equals recognize. So you pledge to make a habit of watching your mind. You evaluate any theft that you've been creating from that's been flying under the radar. And then you recognize it as it comes up in your daily life. And this works, but at first you're going to meet with some resistance, right? Because your brain is wired for all of this other stuff, okay? The happiness thief is not going down without a fight. So there's this indirect way, right? And here it is. I'm going to lay it on you. So even if you don't come to the show, acting in ways contrary to your patterns aids in bringing the happiness thief out of hiding, right? What does this mean? This means doing anything that's not shitty or negative, okay? Which is great news, because it means there's many tools for us to turn our wheels a little bit and go in the other direction. You have to think of it like an ocean liner, right? So for years, for me, it was 34 years. I mean, not right away, but since 7 for sure. I've been going in this direction of unlovability, and my world's getting darker and darker, and we're trying to turn this ocean liner around, right? So if there's something that works for you, compassion, gratitude, just do it over and over and over. That starts to loosen that up a little bit. If there's a teaching you hear, if there's a meditation that works for you, just repeat it. It doesn't have to be hundreds. You don't have to sit in meditation for 12 years or become a monk or a nun. You just need to be consistent, and it does work. It absolutely works.
I like that.
Yeah.
And yes to all that. Before we continue, I want to make sure we name the rest of the folks that are working with you. Rosalind Sarshad.
Jocelyn Sarshad, yep.
Emmanuel Ventura Chris, and John Coppola. So
So Jocelyn Sarshad is my niece.
Oh.
And and so she's a singer-songwriter. So she's beautiful. We talk about she did live with me for 4 months, so we talk. The show kind of starts in that way, and so she goes into her own stories, right? During the show, we kind of play off each other as we explain our stories and our own kind of things that keep the own things we've stuffed away in the bag. And one of her things is she's a beautiful singer and songwriter, and she never released a song. So I asked her in the creation of these Per Love practices if she would release a song. And it makes me cry every time. She did that, and we play that song. She sings this song at the end of the show. And It's if you go on my website, Per Love Formula, you can download that song or you can stream it right now. It's amazing, beautiful song. It's called Home by Meadowmaker. Emmanuel Ventura Cruz is her boyfriend. He plays the cello. And so he's our musical support. And so like when I'm talking to my husband, like on Peanuts, when it's like, wah, wah, wah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's pretty funny. So he does an excellent job of adding humor and lightness and transition. He's very talented. He also is a singer, songwriter, and agreed to be on the show. And then at the end, he plays for Jocelyn to sing her song. And then John Coppola has Coppola 2. It's a business of his. He's our director. He's a veteran director at the Fringe. And like I said, he was willing to take us on again after meeting us and getting to know us in 2020, which meant the world to me. And he's been wonderful. He's just made the show come alive. And I'm so grateful for it. Because like I said, we're getting it taped on the 17th. I'm hoping to start doing more larger public speaking and using parts of that show to bring the humor and the seriousness and the vulnerability into my talks. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm so grateful.
I'm bummed I'm not in town. I mean, I have to go to work this weekend, but I'm bummed that this will be an excellent opportunity to catch up. But I will catch up. I will find you in person since you're my neighbor.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to get together for sure.
So we're about 15 minutes before the end of the show. And this is about the part where I ask my guest to share some words of wisdom with our audience. So, Hollywood McNeill, what are your words of wisdom? Not that you haven't been spreading them all day.
Well, like I said, the biggest thing, of course, is persistence with any kind of change. But if these is of interest to you, I would suggest downloading getting the link for the free class. But my words of wisdom is to start by paying attention. Right? We start with a pledge, right? The path to any change starts with an intention. And so if you make an intention to change, again, you don't have to know how to get there. You absolutely don't have to know. You don't have to know how to get there. There's a speaker, again, Ledekian from the New Kadampa Buddhist tradition, who does a talk called "Who Am I" on YouTube, and she says in it, people underestimate our power of imagination, and that we don't believe that what we can imagine can become real, but it absolutely can. So you start with an intention, right, for whatever this change is that you want in your life, and then you pledge. You pledge to pay attention, to grow your awareness. 1 minute, 6 times a day. There's a story of a monk who was busy building a temple. And she got busy with construction delays and cost overruns, he didn't have time for his practice. So he went to his guru and he said, with all of these concerns, I'm worried I don't have time. And he said, all you need is 1 minute, 6 times a day. So I know that people are busy in their lives and, life happens and actually, this is kind of crazy, but your mind will actually throw up roadblocks when you try to change because of it seeks out ways to get. It's not doing it to be evil. The mind is a tool, but it seeks out ways to keep its programming going. So but with awareness, right? You can recognize that. But 1 minute, 6 times a day for 21 days to start paying attention to your thoughts in your mind, the emotions and feelings in your body. And you will start to create a habit that when this will happen automatically, and then you're well on your way to Per Love or wherever you want to go. That's where you start.
That's pretty cool. Let me show folks where they can get in touch with you. So remember, guys, this is her Instagram. Go follow her on Instagram for more stuff. She's got a cool page, so go check out her page. If you want more of the information and the class that she was talking about, here is the website. Go check it out, perloveformula.com, where you can find more stuff. If you still want to get a couple of those tickets that are still available, this is where you go, hollywoodfringe.org/projects/ and this is the number of the show, 9922. Easy to remember, so go check it out. And I also want to tell you a little bit about Fringe. So this is Hollywood Fringe, and you can go there to find out more stuff about the festival. Here it is. So go there, hollywoodfringe.org, and you can find all the shows on there. We've had the fortune of having a couple of people from the different shows could be on this show. So go check them out. It's a great thing. It happens every year. They have some amazing productions. So
Yeah.
go support local theater. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, but there's 300 shows, and each one is an hour long, and so you can do 3 or 4 in a day. It's a great neighborhood where the theaters are, and we have a couple of tickets for the 17th. We also have a show on the 23rd that's got plenty of seats left if you want to come see us. But make a day of it. Yeah, go out there, make a day of it, and yeah, support local theater for sure.
Excellent. We still have about 10 minutes to go, so we're not quite done. We're not done with you yet.
Okay.
So production aside, where are you now? I mean, we've been on this journey with you for the last 50 minutes
Yeah.
of family life, married life, breaking through. Where are you now?
You know, I'm grateful every day for this journey. And right when I started doing Fringe, I started getting invitations to guest on podcasts. So, like I said, the practices showed up. I can remember the day, October 18th, 2021. And I started doing the practices online, teaching them in 22, this wonderful platform that showed up and then disappeared, that was kind of an incubator. And so now I'm starting to, like I said, I retired from architecture that in 17. I came up with the practices in 22. I'm starting to guest on podcasts, and I'm hoping to take it. I love speaking. I love public speaking. I'm hoping like I'm applying to speak at the Mindfulness Expo in Anaheim. That's in September. And yeah, my goal is to my biggest goal is that and as you said, we hear these practices, we hear these things. There's so many books and teachings about these, but but one thing I can say about Per-Love is it's simple and straightforward. If you do these 3 things in Per, and you do them over and over, go over, you study them, you get to know them, you will start to make that change. And so my biggest goal is I'm fortunate enough to have the time and space per my intention to try to get these out there. So yeah, more public speaking, and actually I'm taking the month of July off. I'm doing a road trip from Orange County to Minneapolis and back, long road trip. But plan to incorporate the show into my public talks, and yeah, hopefully you'll be hearing more about it moving forward.
Now, this sounds rather revolutionary for us. It's like a new way of looking at things. How has the process of putting these new ideas out into the universe been for you?
You know, for me, it's been mind-blowing, right? Like you have these aha moments, and it's not new information. It's just put in a different way, right? There was a book I'm looking at over here called Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense that came out in the 80s. Very unfortunate title. And in 2000, or actually in the 90s and in 2000, Dr. Richard Carlson, who wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, right? Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called You Can Be Happy No Matter What, which I read 10 years into my journey. And I picked it up more recently, right before Per-Love came around. And then there's this little teeny credit in there from this guy in the 80s who wrote this book, Dr. Enrique Suarez, who wrote Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense. And he talks about these thoughts, and it was just the piece that put it together, right? And so as an architect, I'm used to putting big puzzles together. I've done hospital works, millions of decisions, right? So where the wisdom has been there, and it's like I said, it's always people are always pointing back to the same simple truths. Putting it in this formula, I just know, at least for me, that there was this missing piece, right? How do we do it, right? Just quickly, just tell me how to do it, right? Not all of these books and all these seminars. And so for me, that's the biggest reward, is having, and I know that works because I did it myself, and I continue to do it myself, and I've taught it to people. And so I'm just grateful and hoping to get it out there. And this class and this show is just one of the just piece on the way.
I think, yeah, you said one thing that makes a big difference is I've done this myself. And right. Because a lot of times we hear people, we buy into things that people don't actually do themselves, but they're selling us. And then when you're stuck in the middle going, which direction do I go? They don't have an answer for us. Does that make sense? Because when
Yeah,
I started doing my coaching and created my coaching program, I was like, I need to put myself through this several times so I can have different outcomes for anybody who asks. So that's one thing that my ear always catches on. Is like, I've done this myself, so
right.
I can tell you what it tastes like.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, it is interesting because most of the teachers and gurus, like I said, they're monks or nuns, or they grew up in meditation, or they've got all kinds of certifications. This is just a normal person, just trying. The path is there, right? And I found it kind of the long way without any kind of formal training, but my own experience. And so I'm so confident in it. I have no doubt in it. I can prove it a million different ways from all the amazing teachers and gurus I've come across. So,
That's pretty awesome. So remind everybody the name of the show, when you're going to be there, and
right. So the show is The Lost Formula to Happiness. We have two performances. One, there's a few tickets left on this Saturday at for 3:30 at Stephanie Fury Studio Theater on Melrose, and then the next Friday, the 23rd at 5:30. Again at Stephanie Fury Studio Theater. So if you can make it, we would love to have you. They say that the hardest thing at the Fringe is getting butts in seats, and I find that to be true. Although again, I'm grateful for the whole experience. A few more butts in the seats would be nice, but it's
so
been wonderful. Yeah.
again, this is the link to the ticket page. So go check that out. Here is her Instagram page. So go follow. And this is her website. So go check that out. Holly, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. I feel like now we need to go grab tacos and talk in
Let's
person.
do. Absolutely. I will, we'll be in touch. We're connected, and I would absolutely, once the show's over and I get my head out of it and I get back, like from my journey across the country, I'll definitely be in touch. We're definitely going to sit down and enjoy the beach and the sun at Laguna Beach, and continue our conversation. So
I'm
thank you
over.
so much for having
Tacos
me.
are on me. So I'm going to
Excellent.
put you in the green
Okay.
room.
I'll take it.
Yeah, for anybody who knows me, people should know I take my tacos very seriously. So
I love to hear that.
I'm going to put you in the green room for a second. I'll be back to say goodbye to you in just a second.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For everybody watching, do we have one? We did do words of wisdom. I think you missed the words of wisdom, but we did do them. We did do it. For everybody watching, thank you for joining us. It's been a special Thursday episode of Put It Together live stream. Remember to join us every Monday. Check us out on all of our pages for our weekly horoscopes on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Christian and Daniel show on Fridays at 6. Zodiacs with my friend Richard Wade Kilgo. Let me show you his information. Remember, he does personal readings, and you can find him at Awakenings. There's the address. You can call him at 949-457-0797 or at his Instagram page for a personal session or a session at the shop. Also, my book, It's Super Self, Everybody in the Colors Game in English and Spanish. $25 signed and delivered. So the $25 covers your delivery fee. And if you're looking for a transpersonal coach, reach out. We identify, acknowledge, and remove barriers. We got one-on-ones, groups, team building workshops, and person or virtual. And again, we mentioned this on the Christian and Daniel show. We're going through some changes on the name, trademark lawyers, but it's still the same program. So make sure you check that out. And happy Pride to everybody. It is Pride Month. So to all of our allies and everybody in the LGBTQIA plus community, happy Pride. Keep enjoying. For now, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and hey, put it together. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.